to another episode of the Making History podcast. Once again, my name is Brian.
And I'm Katie.
And we are the Hesses. And Katie,
Yes.
today, as of recording, is officially your due date.
It's official. We've arrived.
Today's the due date.
I was really hoping that we would not get to this date.
I know.
That you would be here before.
I kind of thought maybe this week we wouldn't be recording, but
yeah. Here we are.
Yep.
Hey.
Yeah. And you carried late with the girls.
Mm-hmm. So I was like kind of expecting that.
Right.
But at the same time, I think just hoping that maybe he would be early.
Right.
Maybe.
Because everybody we've talked to, including your midwife and including like our friends who have talked to their doctors who have said the same thing. It seems like there's a general consensus among like doctors and midwives that baby number 3 is like the most random baby.
Right. Like,
total wild card.
You don't really know like if your first 2 births were pretty similar. Like kind of throw all of that, all of those expectations out of the window because who knows what's going to happen. Wild card, I feel like is the phrase that everybody's used with the third baby, that the third baby is the wild card. So I was like, hey, maybe that means instead of going 2 weeks past my due date and being pregnant for so long, maybe he'll come early. But
nope,
it's okay. Maybe he'll still come earlier than the other 2.
Yeah.
I would be shocked if he doesn't come earlier than...
had an appointment this morning with the midwife. And they were basically saying like he's
ready to go.
He's ready to go.
Locked and loaded.
He's in position.
Yeah. He said they said his head is engaged. So could be any time. And, you know, I feel like there's so many things in pregnancy that it's like, well, this could happen, but that doesn't really mean a whole lot. And like, well, this is a sign that like labor might be starting, or it could mean nothing at all. So it's like, sweet. Yeah. This is super helpful.
Basically just
they're just going to come when they're ready.
Right.
And obviously, you know, we're not going to go past 42 in days, you know, like we're not going to get to 43 weeks. Or we'll do something before then.
Well, yeah.
Because then it becomes, you know, a little bit more risky, which I think honestly he'd be fine.
Yeah.
I know people that have gone that long, but I don't want to.
And
so
it helps though that we historically don't have big babies.
Yes.
So it's not like he's like 9 pounds pushing 10.
Yeah.
You know, the girls were 7 pounds and some.
Yeah.
Both.
7.5. Yeah.
He may be a bit bigger, but we're not talking about huge babies.
Right. No monster babies.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have the genes are in our favor in that area. Yeah. So yeah, it's been good. And really I can't complain. So I'm really thankful and grateful for the pregnancies that I have. But at the same time, I could complain.
Right.
Like if I let myself get there, which I'm just not going to, because that's not helpful for anybody to be whiny and complaining at the end of pregnancy, because then it just makes everything worse. But, you know, I like my body feels great.
Yeah.
I am getting a little bit tired of like not being able to roll over like a normal person. That'd be nice. Like in bed, I feel like it takes me like a couple minutes to go from one side to the other side.
Yeah.
But, you know, if that's the worst that I've got,
right.
I think I've got it pretty good.
Yeah. You have good pregnancies.
Yeah.
And I'll share my story real quick. I also have a hard time turning over in bed. And
Why? Why, Brian?
So I'm 33 and I realize that I'm not old.
Not 33 weeks. 33
I'm
years
not
old.
33. It's a different. I'm 33 years old. And so at the beginning of this year, I got sick and I had a cold, and it may have been allergies too. And I had a cough for the last couple of years. When I get a cough, it kind of hangs around until I like call a doctor.
Right.
I'm like, hey, this has to stop.
Yep. I'm over it.
And we're talking, it was what, maybe 2-3 months of coughing?
Least.
Like a crazy amount of time to have a cough.
Consistently coughing, not just like once or twice a day. It was like all the time.
Yeah, like I can't laugh without coughing hysterically.
Yeah.
And because of that, I've been coughing so long and for so hard that I started aggravating, I guess, some of the muscles. I think the intercostal muscles is what the doctor called it.
Yeah.
And so that it had started to hurt a little bit, and then it got better over time, and we go to the chiropractor.
Yeah.
And they were helping me out, and over time it just got better. I stopped noticing it, stopped feeling it. And then one day, about 3 weeks ago, I sneezed, and it hurt so bad.
Yep.
And it hurt so bad that it took me a couple seconds to actually be able to stand upright, because
so
like
crazy.
Not only did it hurt, but the muscles on the right side in my rib cage like seized up.
Yeah.
And
You're
so
like, something's not right.
yeah. And so I didn't think that at 33 I'd be injuring myself with a sneeze, but
It's
here
like something
we are.
you only see in memes. Like,
Yeah.
I'm at the age where, when I sleep on the wrong type of pillow, I wake up and feel like I've been hit by a semi truck, those types of things. But never expect to get there.
Yeah. And we were talking to the chiropractor, and I was like, what can I do? I was like, what do I need to avoid? He's like, honestly, he's like, you're not going to engage those muscles regularly. He said, just don't sneeze, basically.
No sneezing. Do anything you can to prevent the sneeze.
And that was a couple of weeks ago. I've only sneezed one time since then.
That's impressive, actually.
And it hurt really bad.
Yeah.
And it's really embarrassing
that it was a sneeze.
that it's not like a cooler story of how I got injured. But
you didn't get rammed by a raging bull in the side, or you weren't trying to do some kind of crazy
I didn't
trick.
No, I wasn't like skateboarding. I wasn't, I didn't get in a bar fight. I sneezed. Okay. Well, let's move on.
Okay.
So we have spent the last several episodes talking about pretty much the same thing, but just in different facets.
Yeah.
This idea that kids were meant for freedom, and they're meant to be taught how to manage their freedom and how to have self-control rather than us trying to control them. And so today, let's talk about the relationship between freedom and boundaries.
Yeah. Great.
Because those two things, they have to work in partnership together for this type of parenting to work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think I said this in one other episode, but I'll say it again, that we need both, because when you have freedom without boundaries, you create chaos. If it's absolute freedom with no standards and no expectations and no rules, and you not only have the ability to do whatever you want, but are permitted to do whatever you want, that's absolute chaos.
Oh, yeah. I can't. I don't even want to think about what that would feel like in home.
I know. So we're not looking for like super permissive parenting, but on the other side of the spectrum, if you have boundaries with no freedom, that looks like control. And so we're on one side of the spectrum, you have super permissive parenting, where it's very passive, very weak. Kids are in charge. Kids are running the show. On the other hand, if you have a culture in your home where there are boundaries with no freedom, then that looks like absolute control.
Yeah.
And that looks like very like domineering, authoritarian parenting. Kids have no say. They have no, they're not even allowed to have like opinions or preferences. It's just what the parents say, and that's it. And if you don't do exactly what the parent says when they say to do it, if you don't fear my wrath now, you're going to. That kind of parenting.
Yeah, that's very much so like a because I said so household.
Right.
It's like you don't get to ask questions. You don't get to know why you're doing what you're doing. You just have to do what I say to do now when I say it, or else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in that kind of an environment, kids, they don't really learn how to think. They don't learn how to manage their own freedom. If anything, they just learn how to avoid getting punished. At the end of the day.
Yeah.
They learn survival from mom and dad. And so we want to figure out a way to have a healthy balance and relationship between the two, where there is freedom and there is boundaries. And I think that the younger the kids are, I think the smaller the boundaries lie.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think the hope is that as they get older, we need boundaries less and less because the kids are learning how to manage themselves.
Right.
So they don't need mom and dad implementing as many rules. Right. And so the hope is when they're teenagers, they are very well-functioning people.
Yeah.
Who make good decisions and they think about their future and they just don't need as many rules from mom and dad.
Right, because kids come into the world. I think it's easy to forget sometimes that like kids come into the world not knowing anything.
Right.
Like they literally know nothing. They're blank slates. So you actually have to tell them not to climb onto the counter and grab the kitchen knife.
Right.
You know, like, which seems like common sense to us, but they're not born with common sense. So you have to set those boundaries, which feels like so many things all the time when they're young. But then as they grow and they learn and they understand the world more, how it works and how your family functions, they're able to kind of learn those things without it being set for them.
Right.
You know, of those like those healthy boundaries of, okay, I probably shouldn't do this because that's a little bit like what mom and dad said way back here. And so that's probably not safe. So I'm just not going to do that. And they just kind of learn to critically think and understand how to logic their way through life on their own. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to mention this too. You said that kids aren't born with common sense. And common sense is a phrase that people love. I feel like this is like
clarifying this.
A few episodes ago, we talked about the phrase like God is in control, and people just love throwing that out.
Yeah.
And I don't think much thought has gone into that.
No.
And I think in the same way, people use the phrase common sense. And I actually don't believe that there is such a thing as common sense.
Yeah.
And like you and I have talked about this, and we've had this taught before. And the funny thing about common sense is that whenever I've heard people use the phrase common sense, it's almost always used as an excuse to relieve themselves of the responsibility of actually communicating or helping other people understand.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Because what is common to me isn't common to you, and it may not be common to our neighbors, and it may not be common to the people we work with or whatever. And so for me to assume that you should know what I know without me having to tell you or explain to you or teach you is, I think, irresponsible.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you have like the same knowledge of whatever that topic is, there may be different motivation behind those things. So even that plays into common sense not actually being like a reality, because if the motivation is different, it could change the entire situation. Yeah.
And I see this happen a lot of times. Of course, it happens in parenting. I think in leadership in general, I've noticed that oftentimes people in leadership will get frustrated with the people that they're leading because they feel like they should know what we want them to know. And we do that with kids.
Yeah.
We parents often feel frustrated that kids don't already know what we want them to know.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if you communicated that to them and you took the time to teach them and bring understanding.
Yeah.
And that's just not what kids get in an environment where there's boundaries without freedom, when there's control.
Yeah.
And there's just do what I say. No questions, like you said. Don't ask questions. You're not allowed to ask why.
Yeah.
I don't care if you understand. Just do what I say. And that will often breed frustration on the parent side.
Yeah.
Because then the kids grow up not really understanding, not knowing how to think. And it's like, well, you should know that already.
Yeah.
It's like, well, nobody told them.
Right.
You know?
Yes. Yeah. Like you should just get this.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, why should I just get that though? Like, who says?
Yeah.
And how? And I feel like also frustration comes in with parents in that area when there is no explanation behind it. And I've experienced this, but then the kid gets the same advice or the same boundary from somebody else, but they took the time to explain why and the heart behind it.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, it's okay, well, that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely, I can do that. You know, like 100%. So easy. And then the parent's like, well, I told you that 15 years ago and you didn't listen to me then. You know, it's like, well, no, because you didn't actually give me a reason to listen.
Right.
You just commanded me to do something like a little minion.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. But when you're included in the process of it, you're so much more likely to actually follow that boundary and keep that boundary and respect that because you understand why.
Right.
And you feel like a person. You feel like you're being treated like a person rather than a pawn.
Right.
Of like, this is where I want you to move now. Do that.
Right.
Rather than like, hey, other human being.
Yeah.
I want you to do this because I want to keep you safe, because I love you, because whatever the reason is.
Here's why I think this is the best thing for you to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I know we're not going to, in this episode, probably say everything that needs to be said about boundaries, because it's a very big topic, one that I'm very passionate about and have a lot of thoughts on. But I think if there's one thing people need to know about boundaries, and this is often the misconception, I find that people use the phrase boundaries a lot, but I find there are more people who talk about it than I feel like understand it.
Oh, yeah.
The use of it and the purpose of it. But one of the things about boundaries is that it's not about telling other people what to do as much as it's about telling other people what you're going to do. Because if it's just about telling other people what to do, that's a very controlling environment.
Yeah.
And so it's not just about us telling our kids what to do. It's about telling our kids what we're going to do and let them do what they will with that information.
Yeah.
So I felt like in some of the last episodes, in talking about like presenting options, that we didn't do a very adequate job providing a lot of examples and explaining that.
Yeah.
So I think this topic will help round that out a little bit. And here's one of the ways that we will implement the relationship between freedom and boundaries. So let's say Isabel, who's 3, let's say she wants to play with Play-Doh. Okay, she loves Play-Doh. We have a bunch of little fun Play-Doh toys. And she can make hot dogs and burgers and pancakes and whatever. And if she wants to play with Play-Doh, that's almost always fine. If we're home, I love that. It's a great activity. Keeps you busy, gives you something to do. You're working with your hands and you're thinking, sure.
Being creative.
Being creative. Yep. So the freedom that we extend to her is that here's the Play-Doh. You're welcome to play with it. And the boundary is, if you play with the Play-Doh, please keep it at the table. Yep. That's the rule. Yep. And so I'm happy for you to play with the Play-Doh. I love that you want to. We just don't want it. I don't want to be finding little bits of it all over the rug and all over the couch and everywhere else. I don't want to find a little trail of Play-Doh crumbs all over the house.
Yep. So, smushed into the carpet, Not to mention it would dry out too if it gets left. And then, that's a bummer for her.
Right.
So we're protecting ourselves and her in the process.
Right.
Yeah.
So now the thing is we don't tell her. Now this is where a healthy approach to boundaries comes in. We don't tell Isabel that she can't leave the table with it. Yeah. Because again, that's untrue. Right. Because she has legs and she has the ability to pick it up and walk away. Yes. Which she has done. Yep. So because boundaries isn't about telling her what to do, it's about telling her what we're going to do. We don't say you can't leave the table, because that's not true. We just say we'd like it to stay at the table. And if we find Play-Doh away from the table, we're just going to put it away. And then we let her do what she wants with that information. Yeah.
She is in full control of herself and her decisions.
Yes.
In that moment of like, okay, mom or dad said, don't leave the table. What am I going to do?
Right.
Yep.
And she has the freedom to. And that's where the freedom is that she can leave the table. But the boundaries are, if you do leave the table, we're going to put it away. Yep. And I'm going to walk away from the situation, and the ball's totally in her court. And she gets to do with that information whatever she wants. Yep. Now, again, I want to reiterate that if she chooses to leave the table and we find her playing with the Play-Doh on the couch, the only way this works is if we actually put the Play-Doh away. Yes. That's the only way that it works.
It's a very key part of this process.
Because if
you have to carry it out.
Yes. Because if we don't follow through, we're teaching her that she doesn't have to believe us.
Yeah. Yep. And they learn that real quick.
Yeah. It takes like one time of a parent not following through for a kid to know, okay, you don't actually mean what you say.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You're going to tell me that I have a consequence, but probably not.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
'Cause you're too lazy to follow through.
Right. And that's kind of how we approach most things,
Yeah.
it seems. If the girls were playing outside and they're old enough now that they know don't go on the road, and that's not something we even think about anymore, just because they've got that down. I don't worry about that when they're outside playing. But I remember when Nora, who's 6 now, when she was old enough to start going outside just on her own. I don't remember, maybe she was about 4.
Probably 4. Yeah.
We'd let her kind of go outside, but we'd keep an eye on her. And the rule was, you can go play outside, but if we see you in the road or going near the road, I'm going to bring you inside, and you don't get to be outside anymore. Again, you're free to go near the road. If you want to explore that boundary, you're welcome to. But if you do, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. And I'm going to come outside, I'm going to pick you up, and I'm going to bring you in the house.
Yep.
And that'll be it.
Yep. And I think, too, another part of that is as parents, we have to understand that, like, kids are going to explore the boundaries. They're going to toe the line.
Yep.
They're going to step over the line just to see. They love to, like, do cause and effect. Okay, if I do this, what happens?
Yeah.
Like, are they actually being serious? Like we were saying, like, follow through. Are they really going to follow through, or are they just saying this
Right.
just because? And it's not them being disrespectful. Now, if they do it time and time and time again, then for sure, maybe try something else. But if they do it once or twice, I feel like usually that is kind of, at least we've learned with our kids, like if they try it like 1, sometimes 2 times, they really are just trying to kind of weigh out the situation and understand, like, okay, does mom really mean what she says? Does dad really mean what he says?
Yep.
And so that takes, if you can remember that takes a lot of the frustration out of the process, because they're not trying to be little jerks,
right.
Like just being like, hey, like if we said like, hey, Izzy, please don't touch that glass on the counter because it might break. And she goes and she does exactly that.
Right.
She, the classic, like, look back and slow reach towards the glass. Like, she really is just trying to see, like, what's going to happen, though.
Yeah.
Because she's curious, because she's built that way. And so I think we as parents just have to remember that in the process of implementing boundaries and teaching boundaries,
right,
that is going to be a part of the process. You might have a kid who doesn't really test boundaries, but the next kid you have might.
Yeah.
That was kind of our experience. Nora
Absolutely.
did not test a lot of boundaries, not to say that she didn't test any, but most of the boundaries that we put in place for her, she was just like, cool.
Yeah.
Sounds good, Mom. Sounds good, Dad.
Yep.
Now Izzy, completely different situation.
Yeah.
That she likes to test all the boundaries.
I think,
like, all the time.
Yeah.
So
I think
it's just been a completely different ball game with her.
Yeah. It seems like kids with Nora's personality find safety and comfort in the boundaries.
Yeah.
I think they feel safe knowing that there are standards, and they like knowing what's expected,
Right.
so that they know how to behave.
Yeah.
Is what it seems with a Nora type. And with an Izzy, she really does want to test the boundaries.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is, and I think this is true especially of kids as they get older into their teenage years, but when you have a more strong-willed personality like Izzy,
Yeah.
I think that part of it is they're testing the boundaries almost as if like think about getting on a roller coaster and you kind of put that thing over your over your waist, and you hear it click in, but what do you do once it's there? You
shake it.
You push it back, right?
Yep.
You push back on it to see, is this thing going to hold?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great,
and I
love that illustration.
I think a lot of times kids do that with their parents because they want to know, are you capable of leading me? Because Izzy, she has a very strong personality.
Yeah.
I think she could be an amazing leader because of that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But the thing about people with strong personalities and strong opinions is that they want to know that the people leading them are capable of leading them. And I think a lot of times they push back to see, like, can you handle this?
Yeah. That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah. It's the same thing. Every time I've ever been on a roller coaster, I push back because I want to know.
Even the shoulder ones. Yeah. I'm like, is this are we locked in? Are you actually going to protect me, or am I going to fall out?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
And here's another thing that kids do is that they, in the way that they learn very quickly whether or not they can believe their parents and what they say, a big part of that comes from something called the action point. And I read about this, I think it was Chris Valentin in his book Uprising.
Okay.
It was a really great book on fatherhood and just the necessity of fathers, especially in the world today. But he talked about this thing called the action point, and that is that kids will learn at an extremely young age at what point their parents are going to take action. And so think about, the times we've been at, a grocery store or we've been out wherever, and we see parents and they've got kids in the cart. And it's like this unrelenting, like, hey, don't do that. Hey, don't do that. Hey, stop. Don't touch that. And it's like your kid doesn't care about what you're saying because they know your action point. And for parents like that, where it's just like, it seems like, there may be 5 minutes of, hey, just don't do that. Stop doing that. Stop touching that. Put that down.
It's like all bark, no bite.
All bark, no bite. And what your kids do is they'll learn that when mom or dad's voice hits this tone, or when they reach this volume, that's when they're going to act. So I have until then to do whatever I want.
Yeah, which is so crazy.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they learn. So what we've done with our girls is we implement these boundaries. And so we'll go back to the Play-Doh, or we'll do the same thing with markers. Izzy, you want to have markers? You want to draw pictures? I love that.
Yeah.
Here they are. The markers stay on the table. They only go on the paper.
Yep.
If you color on the table, if you leave the table, we're going to put them away.
Yep.
And our girls know that, like, when we find that, they've colored on the table or they've walked away with the Play-Doh, there isn't like, hey, I said, don't do that. And we put them back.
Yeah.
And then they do it again. I said, don't do that. And we put them back. They know there's none of that.
Right.
They know that our action point is immediate.
Yep. It's like we already gave you clear expectations.
Yep.
You know exactly what's going to happen. This happened, so now this is happening.
Right.
Yep.
Yep. And there's not a whole 5-minute thing where we tell them, or we just bark at them. Hey, stop doing that. Stop doing that. Get back at the table.
Right.
Get back at the table.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I found the plate on the couch. I'm going to put it away.
Yep.
I'm sorry you don't like that. We'll try again tomorrow, or we'll try again in an hour.
Yep. Nobody has time for that.
Right.
You're just wasting your own time and your kids' time by just being all talk and no action.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's exhausting too, because then you end up feeling, as the parent, you feel so disrespected in those moments if you're just constantly just saying the words over and over again and you're not getting any type of response from your kids.
Right.
So you are actually creating this feeling of disrespect because you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
You're literally just talking. So it sounds like the wah, 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 like Charlie Brown's teacher, like wah, wah, wah. That's probably all your kid is hearing if they've never actually had the boundary implemented and stuck to in those moments. Yeah. Yeah.
Because they'll learn their parents' action point and they'll know that until dad's voice reaches this tone, I'm free to keep touching this thing, or I can keep doing that. But as soon as he says that, that's when I know I've got to put it down.
Yep.
And they'll take advantage of that. And so if we were to put this in the language of presenting options to Izzy, those options would look like, hey, Izzy, do you want to play with Play-Doh at the table, or do you want us to put it away? And those are the two options. Yep. And she gets to choose, and she's free, and there are boundaries around her freedom. And again, we're dealing with like 2-year-old or 3-year-old stuff and 6-year-old stuff right now. Yeah. But again, and this is so important, that we're doing this now because when they're 16 and they're 18, we're not talking about Play-Doh at the table. Yeah. We're talking about they got pregnant, or we're talking about, our kids got arrested, or very far more severe consequences.
Yeah, so they know when you teach them at such a young age with such trivial consequences, they learn that you are serious when you say, here's the boundaries, here's what's going to happen on either side of your choices. You can stay at the table, or you can leave the table and it goes away.
Right.
And so they learn when you actually stick to your word and you take action, like you said, you have that action point immediately when they make that choice. They know that when you say that when they're 16 and 17, that you actually mean what you say. Because if you all of a sudden just start implementing that type of practice later on in life, it can be done. I know we've said that like these principles and things, strategies can be applied at any age, and truly they really can, but it will take a lot more work when they're 16 if you don't stick to it now. Well, and if you don't train them to actually believe you when you say what you say.
Right. And that's it. Because when you start this later in life, like you said, it can be done, but it's just a matter of retraining them to believe you. And the other beauty of this too is that we're letting them learn without having to control them.
Yeah.
And that's really the beauty of this.
Yeah.
Is that in presenting Izzy those options, we're not controlling her. We're saying, do whatever you want. Leave the table if you want to. I'm going to put it away, but do that if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
Because again, as they're older, we don't want to have to be mom and dad who are overbearing with rules.
Nope.
We don't want to be the helicopter parents. We want to be the parents who have raised kids, who understand that the consequences they experience and the outcomes of every event and every situation of their lives is directly related to the choice they made and their response to it.
Yeah.
And so we teach them young, you're in control of yourself. Do with that what you will.
Yeah.
And we help them navigate managing freedom and self-control.
Yeah. Like, so for older kids, an example could be like implementing a curfew.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you're driving now.
Right.
You're welcome to stay out until 10:30 tonight. And if you come home at 10:30 on time, awesome. You're building my trust.
Yep.
We can do this again. If you come home after 10:30, next time you ask to go out, sorry.
Right.
Not going to happen. And like, they'll believe you.
And
if you've done this, they'll say, okay, great. I know that you mean what you say because you keep your word. You take action on the things that you say you're going to take action on.
Yep.
So I'm going to believe you and I will be home by 10:30.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Because I learned as a teenager that I had a lot of wiggle room in my curfew.
Sure.
Because I would get home late and I wouldn't really have a consequence. You know, it was like, we told you to be home at this time.
Right.
And so there was a consequence because I was losing my parents' trust.
Sure.
In those times, but I was still allowed to go out.
Right.
So it was like, well, like I was okay with that in the moment.
Yeah.
Because in my teenage brain, trust and respect, you know, wasn't as weighty as it is as a fully mature adult, you know, who understands that those things are very valuable. But at the time, I was kind of like, well, it'll be okay. I'll go out again tomorrow and I'll probably come home late again.
Right.
And then the same thing will happen again.
At most, I'll have a mini lecture.
Yep.
And
I can handle that.
That'll be it. I can handle that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, if the situation had been different and I wasn't allowed to go out the next time I wanted to with my friends, I probably would have stuck to curfew a whole lot more than I did. And so I think that like a lot of that was just due to the consequences were not being fully enforced.
Yeah.
And so I learned that. Yeah. And I think, you know, a lot of that was just like the kindness of my parents, honestly, you know, of them like attempting to just, you know, give me all the freedom. But in turn, it really ended up working against itself.
Well, and to
the niceness of my parents, I guess I should say. Let me edit that comment. That was my parents being nice to me.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Good catch. And I was going to say that a lot of this also comes down to knowing your kids, and that it's possible that your parents' leniency towards you being late with curfew was knowing that like you weren't really a troublemaker.
That's true. I was not. It was because we were talking or because we watched a movie a little bit
You weren't
too
like
late.
a big partier.
Yeah. I wasn't going
You
crazy.
were like a pretty straight-laced, you know, kid. And so that may have played into it too.
That is true. Yeah.
But still, I think it would have been, you're right. I think it was nice of your parents to let you do that over and over again.
Yeah.
I think it would have been kind of them to say, oh, hate that for you.
Yeah.
You know, next time you're not going to go out.
Yep.
And then after that, we'll see. Would you tell the story of the time you found Nora in her room when she was about probably 3. This is one of my favorite stories.
Yes.
So I'll preface it. When we moved into this house, Nora was 3, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, she would have been 3.
Yep.
About 3.5. And, you know, she had her new bedroom upstairs. And so new space just came with new, you know, new rules and new expectations and new routines. And so one of the things we started doing with her, and we've always implemented a rest time.
Yeah.
Because our girls, for whatever reason, they stopped napping at like 2.
Yeah.
Which is...
Please be different.
I know.
Little baby boy.
I know, Oliver, please nap till
Nap
you're like
forever.
4. Yeah, 4 or 5. But they stopped napping around 2.5. And so we decided we wanted to keep that time kind of built in because we were used to having that you know, hour, 2-hour break in the afternoon where they were sleeping. And so we thought, well, we'll implement a rest time. And that means you're going to go to your room and you can sleep or you can just play. But this is just a time for you to be kind of on your own and be creative and play just on your own.
Yep.
And so we've loved that.
Highly recommend that.
Highly recommend
Side
that.
note, before we continue, if you don't have a rest time implemented with your kids or quiet time or whatever you want to call it, do it.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's good for them.
It's so good for them.
Yeah.
They learn how to play independently, helps their little imaginations flourish, and you get some time by yourself.
Our girls are in rest time right now.
They are.
Yeah. They're upstairs doing whatever they're doing.
Who knows what?
And we've not heard anything, so I trust it's going well.
Anyways, continue with the story.
So anyways, we had implemented rest time, and we would have her go up as around lunchtime. So we'd make her a little lunch, which she called a breakfast snack. It was never lunch.
No.
Even to this day.
Right.
They don't eat lunch, they have breakfast snacks. And we've kept that up because we thought it was so funny.
Yep.
And so you could be eating a ham and cheese sandwich at 1:00 in the afternoon. That's not lunch.
Right.
It's a breakfast snack.
Yep.
For whatever
Don't
reason.
you dare call it lunch.
Yeah.
I
She's like,
didn't eat lunch. I ate a breakfast snack.
there'd be times where she would correct us. She'd be like, I didn't ask for lunch. I wanted a breakfast snack.
Yep.
It's like, okay, this sandwich is a breakfast snack. I don't know. I don't really know what the difference is. But anyways, so one of the new rules when we moved into this house and she got into her new room was with her breakfast snack, we'd give her a treat. It'd be a piece of candy, a little cookie or something. And the rule was, we're going to give this to you. You can eat the treat when you're done eating the rest of your food. So eat your breakfast snack. And then when everything's gone, you're welcome to eat your treat. And then that was it. We kind of left it at that.
Which is a lot, like, looking at it now, I'm like, wow, we have expected a lot of her at 3. You know, a lot of self-control.
Yeah.
And wouldn't you know, she did it.
Guess
she
what?
Had it. It worked.
3-year-olds are capable of self-control. It's crazy.
It's wild.
But there was one time very early on in this new routine that you went up. I don't remember why you were going into her room. For some reason, you brought her food with her treat. It was fruit snacks.
I bet it was to go potty. Because this is around the time that, like, we were still helping her go potty.
Maybe.
We'll say that.
Maybe.
It doesn't really
matter. For some
for
reason,
the sake of the story,
you had left the room briefly and then you had gone back into her room for
Yes.
something.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I walk in for whatever it was. And I remember she was not in the room while I discovered this.
Okay, so maybe she was going.
So I think maybe she was going potty or she was getting something. And so I look at her plate and all of her food is still there. There's probably a couple bites taken out of whatever it was. And I just look in her little fruit snack bag just to check. And I pull one out and there was a bite taken out of it, but it was back in the bag. And then I was like, that's interesting. And so I took out another one and there was a bite taken out of that one too. And probably, I don't remember all of them or just most of them.
I remember you telling me it was all of them.
Had bites taken out of them, but half of the fruit snack was put back in the bag so that maybe she wouldn't get caught. And it was one of the, like, I was weirdly proud of her, like, strategic thinking,
that was one of the moments. That was one of the moments I knew that she was really smart. Yeah. That was a clever move
so
for
clever.
a 3-year-old.
Yes. She's like, the bag's not empty. So they're probably not going to notice that I ate half of every fruit snack in here. And so it was like a mixture of like being proud, but also like, oh, bummer, you know, like she didn't really listen fully.
Yep.
She halfway listened. But, you know, of course.
Yeah.
I told her, you know, we ended up having the conversation like, hey, we saw, you know, that you ate half of your fruit snacks and put them back in the bag before you finished your breakfast snack.
Trying not to laugh.
Definitely trying to keep it together, because those are the moments in parenting that we all have, that it's like, okay, hold it together. And then as soon as you leave the room,
we're going to laugh
crack
about
up.
this.
Yep. And so that has forever been one of our favorite stories, that, you know, she had her boundary set and she did not follow. She didn't keep that boundary. She ate her treat before her breakfast snack. And then the next day we didn't give her a treat, because that was the deal. Yeah, that was the boundary. If you eat your treat before the other food that's on your plate, then the next day, 2 days, depending on how long this has been happening, you just don't get a treat.
Right.
And so she didn't get one, and she didn't complain about it at all either.
Yeah, because she owned up.
Yep.
She was like, yeah, I get it.
Yep.
I ate it.
Yep.
And so, yeah, and that was the relationship between freedom and boundaries, is that we're going to give you this and we're going to trust you.
Yeah.
And that's another big part of it too, is as parents, if you want to have healthy relationships with your kids, find ways to extend trust to them.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And so we extended that trust. Here's this treat. We're going to trust you to just wait until you're done eating everything else before you eat it.
Right.
And yeah, and the boundary was, you're free to eat the treat now if you want to. You have that capability.
Yeah.
If you choose to do that, you just won't get one tomorrow. You decide whether or not, you know, that works for you.
Whether the treats keep flowing or not.
And so I think that happened maybe 2 times with her.
Yeah.
And then from then on, it was built in. It was no question. You could walk into her room at any point. She had never since then eaten her treat before her other food. And now she's 6, it's 3 years later, and still.
And she's managing her sugar intake more than we do.
She was.
It's bizarre.
There was a moment last year. I don't know if you remember this or if you even heard it, because it happened very quickly. We had friends over, and it was after church on a Sunday, and we had all gotten Taco Bell.
Yeah.
And this was last year, so she was 5. Because I remember thinking, what 5-year-old says this? But we all had Taco Bell, and one of our friends had a big thing of Mountain Dew, and she asked him, she was like, oh, what's that drink? And he explained, he's like, oh, it's a pop, you know, it's Mountain Dew or whatever. Yeah. And she goes, and she was kind of looking at it like, ooh, like I'd like to have a sip of that. Yeah. You know, she's probably never had Mountain Dew.
Right.
But she asked him, she goes, oh, is there caffeine in that? 5 years old. She asked him, is there caffeine in that? He goes, yeah. She goes, oh, I'm going to bed soon. I better not.
I don't think I was there for that, or didn't hear it.
And in that moment, I heard the whole thing, and I'm thinking, like, she is managing herself. Like that is what this is unto, is raising kids who know how to manage themselves.
Yes.
That a 5-year-old, because of these methods that we've implemented, a 5-year-old thought to ask the question, does that pop have caffeine in it? It does. Okay. Next line of thinking, I'm going to bed soon. That's probably going to prevent me from sleeping. So I'm just not going to have a sip.
Yep.
And I didn't say a word.
That is so funny.
About it.
Yeah. And that's like, that just is a culmination of little explanations along the way.
Right.
That like, if you just take an extra 10 seconds in the moment with your kid to explain, this is what this is why we're not having it right now, or this is why you get to have it right now.
Right.
Then you get a 5-year-old saying, oh, no, thanks. I'm going to go to bed.
Oh, yeah. No caffeine for me, thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
What? Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny.
Granted, we do talk about the difference in their personalities. And so you're going to have your Noras who they enjoy logic and they enjoy the boundaries.
Yeah.
And they like to know what is good and what is, what is right.
Yeah.
And then, like, I don't expect that an Isabel would, at that age, ask the same questions.
No.
Now, maybe she's doing well.
She is.
But she's just so much more prone to test the boundaries than Nora ever was.
Yeah.
And so just keep that in mind, that
Right.
get to know your kids, get to know their personalities, get to know how they think and how they function.
Yep. And adjust the boundaries.
And
accordingly.
adjust accordingly,
Yeah.
and adjust expectations accordingly. So I think it would be really damaging to our relationship with Izzy is if when she turned 5, we started saying things like, oh, well, when Nora was 5.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden we're inviting comparison of perceived value.
Yes.
And all of a sudden we are communicating to Izzy that you're not as good as your sister because you're not doing what she was doing at this age.
Right. Which just makes my heart really sad to even just think about that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not helpful for 2 reasons.
No.
One, for what I just said, but also that Izzy isn't wired to think the way Nora thinks and to function the way she functions.
And that's okay.
And that is okay.
Yep.
And
That's
we're
actually a beautiful part
Yes.
of each of them.
It
That
is.
they are not the same.
We're parenting them the same way.
Yep.
But we understand that Izzy is going to take longer to learn things than Nora did.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yep.
But you and I are going to stick with it.
Right.
We have our goals in mind. We're going to continue pursuing connection with them.
Yep.
We're going to continue showing them the relationship between freedom and boundaries. And we're going to let both of them test it as they will.
Yeah.
And with Izzy, we'll get a lot more pushback. But I'm okay with that.
Yep.
Because I believe that her brain is wired to be more curious than Nora is.
Yeah. Yeah. In a different way. Because Nora's very curious about details
Right.
of things and why things are the way that they are.
Yes.
And Izzy wants to
true.
know like how things work, but like by physically figuring it out,
Right. Yeah.
not by asking questions.
Yep.
And that's great. And I think that too, when you as parents like allow joy to come in the differences of your kids and you celebrate their differences,
Right.
that also helps the siblings to celebrate differences, and not just in your family. That's going to expand
Right.
to all the people that they meet and not be like, hey, you're not like me, so therefore I don't like you, because it's easy to be that way. But I think when you practice these things as parents and you celebrate your kids for who they are and you understand that like, hey, you're wired differently, that's great. We're going to still love you the same. We're not going to try and make you be your sister or your brother or whoever, they learn also to celebrate each other's differences,
Right.
and value people for being different and unique.
Right.
And so that's just like kind of an added, I feel like so much of these things have added bonuses that
Yeah.
I just like to add in, to be like, hey, it's not just for what's going on in your home. Like this
Yeah.
is going to expand into when they leave your house or when they go to school or
Right.
meeting new people at the grocery store, wherever it is.
Yep. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's good for this episode.
Yep. Agreed.
All right. Cool. Well, that's it. And if you listen, thank you for listening. And if you've watched on YouTube, thank you for watching. And we will see you next time.